Welcome to the Retiring Canada podcast, where our mission is to educate and empower you to make the most informed, rational, and productive financial decisions. Hosted by certified financial planner, author, and chartered investment manager Michael Isbister, you'll go behind the scenes to uncover the tips and strategies to help you invest smarter, optimize your retirement income, and reduce the amount of tax you pay. Michael is an investment advisor with Fundamental Wealth, a trade name of Harbourfront Wealth Management, an IROC dealer. And now, here's your host, Michael Isbister.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Retiring Canada podcast. In today's episode, we're going to discuss a common mistake done by Canadians when they set up their tax-free savings account. Specifically, we're going to discuss what is a TFSA and why should you care, why it's a great income planning tool for retirees, understanding beneficiary designations, what newcomers to Canada need to consider when opening a TFSA, and penalties to avoid and how to fix mistakes that can happen. For all the links and resources mentioned in today's episode, please check out the link in the show notes. Let's get into it. All right, so before we chat about this common mistake I see time and time again when clients are bringing their assets to our firm, let me first give you a 30-second crash course on what the tax-free savings account, or the TFSA, is and how it can be a huge benefit to retirees. First off, to be very straightforward, the name kind of stinks. Please don't think this is solely a savings account, as the name implies. The truth is that this account can hold nearly any qualified investment, including stocks, mutual funds, bonds, exchange-traded funds, and more. If you look at your TFSA and all you see is cash or high-interest savings, it's probably time to talk to a professional. Second, the TFSA allows your investment to grow tax-free, a term I don't get to say too often in the world of personal finance. This tax-free growth can be a substantial benefit, especially to retirees creating a steady stream of income. It can be a great tool to supplement lump sum purchases in retirement without driving up your marginal tax rate. Lastly, be sure you are contributing and maximizing this account early and often. If you have the surplus cash in your bank account or a non-registered account generating taxable investment income, don't delay this TFSA top-up. The goal on our team here is to have every one of our clients' TFSAs topped up in January of every calendar year. So if you haven't done so already, review your contribution room and get the TFSA accounts topped up as soon as possible. As a quick reminder for all of you before I get into the purpose of today's episode, if you've never contributed and have been a Canadian resident age 18 or older since 2009, the cumulative TFSA contribution limit for 2023 is now $88,000. That is up $6,500 from 2022. Now, many of you are familiar with the tax-free savings account and the amazing ability that it has to help you create a tax-free pool of retirement assets that can be used to create a sustainable retirement income. Now, besides being such an amazing tool to grow your wealth tax-free, it also has the benefit that is often overlooked by Canadians, and that is the successor holder beneficiary designation. So you're probably familiar with beneficiary designations on your defined contribution pension plans, your RRSPs, or even your RIF accounts. If you have a spouse or common law partner, it's likely that you've named them as a direct beneficiary on these retirement accounts. Now, with the tax-free savings account, you can also name direct beneficiaries. However, there is a special designation unique to the tax-free savings account that can reduce the impact of taxation to your spouse and to your final estate. Now, as I mentioned already, this unique designation is called a successor holder, and it is very different than the regular beneficiary. Let's go through an example. Let's say my wife and I each have $50,000 in a tax-free savings account. So between both of us, we have $100,000 in TFSAs. Now, I'm going to pick on myself here because I love my wife, and let's say something tragic happens to me and I pass away prematurely. There are two scenarios that would then take place. Scenario one, I name my wife as a regular beneficiary. She would receive the full $50,000 tax-free. However, there may be a few added tax consequences she could now be exposed to. First, Any investment growth in my TFSA between my passing and the date my wife gets the funds would be considered taxable as income back to my wife. So say my $50,000 grew by $1,000 after my passing. My wife would be sent a T4A slip to have this investment growth added into her income for that calendar year. Second, say my wife decides to reinvest these funds in a non-registered account. Now this is a taxable account. Well, now the underlying investment would generate investment income in the form of interest, dividends, or capital gains. This additional income could bump her up into a higher marginal tax rate, and for retirees, could have the potential to trigger an old age security clawback or a loss of the guaranteed income supplement in some cases. Lastly, there's now a potential tax liability that I've passed along to my wife. The new non-registered account my wife opened is now a pending tax liability to her estate. You cannot name a direct beneficiary on a non-registered account, meaning the account would be subject to probate and potential tax implications to her final tax return. Now, granted, it would make the most sense for her to top up her own TFSA prior to utilizing a taxable non-registered account. However, if she does not have the available contribution room in her TFSA, amounts invested in the taxable account will generate a future tax liability. Now let's assume that I name my wife as the successor holder on my TFSA account. Now in this scenario, first, my wife will still receive the $50,000 tax-free. However, she now also receives my TFSA contribution room, meaning she now has her TFSA worth $50,000 and my TFSA worth $50,000. Second, all investment growth after my passing and into the future is never taxed, as now the full amount remains inside of the TFSA, growing well, tax-free. And lastly, she doesn't need to concern herself with additional taxation to her final estate, mentioned in my previous example. This is because the TFSA account bypasses probate when a beneficiary is named. Now, in my scenario, it would not be advisable for my wife to name our minor child as the beneficiary after her hypothetical passing, as there are numerous pitfalls in doing so. What I mean by this is my wife could name a direct beneficiary to her TFSA after my passing. That way the funds would be sent directly to them at my wife's passing and would not be subject to probate. Again, huge asterisk on this comment if considering naming a minor here. Now, I'm starting to venture a little bit into building a proper estate plan. So by no means should you simply name direct beneficiaries to any accounts until a proper estate planning review is completed by a professional advisor. I recently completed my Chartered Life Underwriter designation that gives me the knowledge to help construct efficient estate plans and ensure wishes are being met and taxation is being minimized. So if this is something you need completed, please reach out to a professional like myself to get the wheels in motion in creating an estate plan. So if you are unsure whether or not your spouse or common law partner is a successor holder, be sure to review your last statement. Do you see the designation in there by beneficiary? Now, I should add that if you didn't name your spouse or common law partner as the successor holder, rather you just named them as the regular beneficiary, there is still an opportunity for the surviving spouse to benefit from the TFSA's tax benefits. The surviving spouse can complete a number of steps with CRA to ensure they receive similar privileges as a successor holder beneficiary. This process includes filing documents with CRA and being subject to time constraints. If completed correctly and within a certain time limit, the spousal beneficiary can receive the TFSA at fair market value and roll over the amount into the TFSA without using her own TFSA room. Now, with all the added steps and the potential to lose the tax-preferred treatment of the TFSA, you can see why in most cases the successor holder designation is the preferred choice for spouses and common law partners. So a few other key aspects to this process you should be aware of, especially if you and your spouse are newer to Canada. You'll need to be careful when naming a Canadian resident without a social insurance number or a survivor that is a non-resident. Your survivor will want to be sure they apply for a valid SIN. If they are a non-resident, they should ask for an individual tax number from CRA by filing a specific form called a T1261. Having an individual tax number for non-residents is needed in order to benefit from the successor holder designation. Another pro tip that you need to know is that you can have more than one TFSA account. So my wife could have 2 TFSAs, mine and hers. So there's no rush to change anything after my passing. However, she could merge the 2 together using a direct transfer form, sometimes called a qualifying transfer, as it's adding my TFSA room to hers. Generally speaking, I would suggest utilizing one TFSA account over the long term. Tracking contributions and withdrawals from multiple TFSAs can be tricky, and if you make a mistake and overcontribute, CRA will penalize you 1% per month on the overcontribution. This is where keeping things simple and having one TFSA will mitigate the chances of an overcontribution. Alright, so a lot to unpack in today's episode. And before we finish off today, let's cover off a few action items you can take today to better your situation. First, if you don't already have a TFSA, you should strongly consider opening one. The long-term benefits tax-free investment growth can have in your retirement plan is substantial. Second, if you have a TFSA set up already, review the beneficiary designation on the most recent statement. If you have a spouse or common law partner, you may want to consider having them as a successor holder rather than a regular beneficiary. And lastly, review how the money inside of your TFSA is invested. Is it sitting in cash or savings? Does this align with your risk tolerance and time horizon for this account? Or should it be invested in a different manner? Alright, so that does it for today. For all the links and resources discussed in today's podcast, please check out the link in the show notes or visit retiringcanada.ca/1. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave us a review in your favorite podcast app. And if you have any questions you'd like me to answer on future episodes, please click the link in the show notes to submit your question, and I'll do my best to answer them in future episodes. And hey, when it comes to your retirement, don't take chances. Make a plan so you can retire with confidence.
All comments are of a general nature and should not be relied upon as individual advice. The views and opinions expressed in this commentary may not necessarily reflect those of Harbourfront Wealth Management. While every attempt is made to ensure accuracy, facts and figures are not guaranteed. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing or tax advice. Please seek advice from your accountant regarding anything raised in the content of the podcast regarding your individual tax situation. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.